Hello and welcome to the Book Show on Diversity Television. I'm Ava Colopy, a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. My work often focuses on the lived experience of social issues as they play out in family dramas. And we are here in Ireland, the land of literature and academic debate. A very fitting place to be today. So today I'm going to talk about a very controversial subject, which is always good because that's more interesting. It is the real versus imagined or socially manufactured gender differences, and a very, very excellent book for starting discussions on this issue, based not only on someone's opinions, but based on a lot of medical research. It is a book by Dr. Leonard Sachs, PhD. It is Why Gender Matters, What Parents and Teachers Need to Know About the Emerging Science of Sex Differences. Now, I read the copy of it I just showed you from the Multnomah County Library System in Portland, Oregon, because back home we have a wonderful, wonderful public library system and very much support literacy. So it's actually been expanded, revised, and updated with new research since then. Now, why I recommend this particular book? So when I read Why Gender Matters, I went into it assuming I would not like the book and would disagree with probably most of what was in it. But why not? Why not read it anyway? And there's no point in sort of living in an echo chamber where it's just your opinions going out and they come back to you. No, let's hear different opinions, different points of view. So, in the end, I found he actually makes many good points throughout the book and discusses the positives and negatives of single-sex classrooms. It could be even in mixed gender schools, but single-sex classrooms. And he gives the reader a lot to think about, and he talks about how having an education system, at least in the United States, some other places as well, run primarily by women and with female teachers can create a profoundly negative experience for boys who are constantly told that they're doing things that are wrong, such as not being able to sit still or being very loud, maybe kind of pushing and shoving each other. Things that are very normal for boys and maybe very annoying to most girls, but they're not wrong behaviors, they're just different. They're just different to what most girls would be doing. So I'm not asking you to agree or disagree with anything that's in this book. I'm just asking you to read it with an open mind and seriously consider what he discusses in it and the points that he makes, and not just go, oh, he's talking about that, so I'm not going to read it. No, you actually do have to read it to get into what he's talking about, and then we can start that discussion about real versus imagined or socially manufactured gender differences, because we can't really discuss or debate that intelligently if we haven't really researched it at all. And he's talking about a lot of research, not just his own, but a lot of different research studies that other doctors have done, so we can get a lot of information on it. So I just ask you to consider this instead of just following, say, one political party or nonprofit group's script, or even maybe your church's group, their script about something, that it's this way and it's only this way. Because I want you to remember that our society used to follow a script about women. Namely, that women were stupid, overly emotional, irrational, and not capable of living alone or looking after ourselves. Women such as myself would not have been allowed to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, anything like that. Work in business, no, because our society had a script. And this is true of a lot of things today, that we're just developing new scripts rather than oftentimes actually really becoming more open-minded, which is more difficult and takes more intelligence. Our society, I would like to remind you, also had a script about African Americans, namely that they were thought of as subhuman and treated worse than well-bred dogs and horses. Sadly, most particularly in the history of parts of my own country, my own original home country, the United States. So even up into the 1950s, blacks in my country could not swim in public pools or drink from public water fountains, as my parents told me was still happening in their childhoods, which I personally find disgusting, since I generally think of everyone as having the same potential. Whether or not they live up to that in their adult life is another matter, but anyway. So these are scripts. These are scripts that were in our society, and we're developing new ones now. So I think we can have a more balanced view that takes a lot more intelligence, a lot more intellectual flexibility, and therefore a lot more work. Instead of just saying it's this, it's definitely this, that's all there is, and put blinders on, and I don't want to have to read a new book and consider new ideas or new research. I just don't even want to be bothered with that. Well, that's not how we're ever going to have progress in society. That's never how we've had it in the past. So let's take, for example, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, like many straight white men in history, he's generally, at times, he's just been spoken of in only good ways, and that has been the script. And then sometimes people want to come in and have the new script, which is not any more open-minded, and that is to only point out his flaws, anything he did that was negative, and then we're still not having really a realistic picture of the whole person, and we're just following these scripts, rather than oftentimes looking at all of the facts. If you're saying, oh, I look at the facts, you cherry pick your facts. That's not the same as looking at all of the facts. So he doesn't have to be talked about as if he is a great man who is beyond criticism or a terrible mailman bastard who did some bad things. We can take a balanced view that he was a human being who did some truly great things, like help us get through the Great Depression, my country, my grandparents who spoke quite well of him, because he did help with that immensely and get us through World War II and finally have some proper social welfare programs, so we'd have that in my country. And he did some terrible things to the Japanese, such as the internment camps in the United States and dropping the second atomic bomb. Some wartime arguments can justify dropping the first bomb, but not the second bomb. And when you're someone like me who's had Japanese English language students and talked in an advanced English language class about World War II and issues around it between our two countries, especially with how very respectful Japanese people are of teachers, it really hits you right here, that issue. And it's not just something you're discussing in sort of an intellectual way, it becomes much more personal. So I'm not trying to downplay the effect of dropping the bombs, especially the second one, at all. But he also did some great things. And instead of just following a script, he was great, he was terrible. He was a human being, and he did some great things and then some other terrible things. So we don't have to have a biased or misleading narrative about President FDR. We can accept all of this as true and part of the whole narrative with all of the facts. So for example, in the same kind of line of thinking, modern schools can be both great and terrible, like Dr. Sachs is talking about in his book. So maybe it's great for girls now and terrible for boys. Or maybe single-sex classrooms can be both good and bad in different ways. And I'm not telling you to have one view or the other on it. I'm just asking you to read the book and enter into a real debate about it, discussing and debating these different ways of educating kids, or where gender matters, where it doesn't matter, where there is a difference, where there isn't, and actually look at grounded research instead of going, well, this is my opinion. Well, okay, but based on what? What research? What facts do you actually know about the subject? Let's get into something more interesting and delve into the subject, and it's a really good book for that. So now I'm going to read to you the description, and this is about the updated version that I have not had the time to read yet, but it sounds very interesting. So it says, a revised and updated edition with more than 70% new material of the evergreen classic about the innate differences between boys and girls and how best to parent and teach girls and boys successfully, with completely new chapters on sexual orientation and on transgender and intersex kids. 11 years ago, Why Gender Matters broke ground in illuminating the differences between boys and girls, how they perceive the world differently, how they learn differently, how they process emotions and take risks differently. Dr. Sachs argued that in failing to recognize these hardwired differences between boys and girls, we ended up reinforcing damaging stereotypes rather than breaking them down. Medicalizing normal behavior, for example, rising rates of ADHD. There are times when maybe a boy does not have ADHD, he's just more hyperactive than a girl. So maybe sometimes it's being overdiagnosed. failing to support kids to reach their full potential. In the intervening decade, the world has changed drastically with an avalanche of new research which supports, deepens, and expands Dr. Sachs's work. This revised and updated edition includes new findings about how boys and girls interact differently with social media and video games. So important right now, like the bullying on social media and how that can affect someone psychologically. A completely new discussion of research on gender non-conforming, LGB, and transgender kids. New findings about how girls and boys see differently, hear differently, and even smell differently. How it's maybe processed differently in different parts of the brain depending on the gender. With no opinion when I read the other one before that one or the other is better. There's no hint that he's saying either is better, just that it's different and the two together are a good complement to each other. So there's no discussion about anyone being better than anyone else, and there's no kind of hate speech in it. It's just about a research and trying to support every different kind of child to be their best self and to feel that confidence in who they are. So there's a new material about the medicalization of bad behavior. So that is from Dr. Leonard Sachs, graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and there's a bunch of information on him there. But my point is, it's a great way to get into a discussion about this matter and to really educate ourselves on it. It's a very interesting and engaging read when I read it before, and if I ever have the time, I would love to read his updated and expanded version. Now, he can be very controversial in that the subject matter is controversial, but he's actually tries to be balanced a lot of the time, though some of you may find his work, controversial or offensive to you. That's okay, but please just read it, discuss it, consider it, discuss it with people around you. Have a group of people read it and say what you think is correct or incorrect and why. Like, go for it. There's no reason to go, oh, well, it's about that subject, so I'm just not going to read it. Why? Why limit yourself? Please, by all means, read it and have that discussion. And if there's any way for you to maybe post comments on a feed about this and include your opinions in a discussion with Diversity Television about this and other things we bring up on the different episodes, by all means, go for it. We fully encourage you to be actively involved in a conversation. Never trying to dictate to you, trying to encourage that conversation with all of us. So, thank you for watching the book show on Diversity Television, and I hope you'll join us next time for more books and opinions. I'm Ava Colopy here in Ireland, and to all our viewers out there, I hope you find what you're looking for.